Hello and welcome. Here comes the queen now. Get and move so I can get your tail. Anyway, hello and welcome. So today we're going to be talking about how many rats you should get, because this is a question that pops up a lot, and I feel like some people are very confused because there's some misinformation out there. So information has changed, at least in the States, since I started getting rats on how many you should have, and it fluctuates pretty frequently. So let's talk about it. So as we all know, rats are social animals. The Gravies are watching me very intently, because normally when I sit here I'm working on this cage and they can sneak snacks, and they're just like, do you have snacks? And no, Kelpie, I don't have snacks. I'm so sorry, my love. I don't. Georgia's behind me. Oh, did you know his nose? Can you see her nose? I don't know if you can. Oh, her little nose. As I've mentioned many times in the past, rats are social animals, meaning they do not do well on their own. It is a requirement that they have company, rat company, not just your company, because otherwise they can get extremely stressed. It can lower their immune system. They can get depressed. It can cause behavioral issues. It can cause health issues. It can cause all sorts of issues for a rat if they do not have companions of the same species. So that means that you are not an adequate companion. Your dog is not an adequate companion. Do not put other rodents in the cage with your rat. It will end badly. Your cat definitely isn't an adequate companion. They need other rats. Now, you're going to see a lot of people who say, well, I had a lone rat and it was fine. No, it was not fine. The rat was not okay. And I would argue that the people who say they're fine just don't really know how to read their body language. I've ended up in lone rat situations before, never on a permanent basis, thankfully, because my rats have always managed to find... My rats have always managed to do intros and be integrated into other groups, even when they are very difficult rats. But I have ended up with lone rats. So, for example, my rat Sailor, she was extremely aggressive, and she only got along with her siblings. Even after being spayed, she would only accept Riff Raff and Heidi, and anytime I tried to put her with other rats, she would attempt to unalive them very, very quickly. So until Riff Raff and Heidi died, that was her group. From 6 months to about 2.5 years old, she was just living with Riff Raff and Heidi. And then when Riff Raff and Heidi passed away, Sailor was alone for a bit. And I remember very clearly when I did intros with her again. So she was alone for a little bit. She was kind of reclusive. She did not seek me out very often. She was very clearly depressed and stressed being alone. So I ended up doing intros with her and my friend Cappy's rats. And I remember we started with neutral space just because Sailor was always so difficult to do intros with. And immediately when we put them all together, she walked over to Cappy's rat Grant, and she slid her head under Grant's head asking to be groomed, because she hadn't had rat interaction for a bit and she was lonely and she wanted that companionship that no other person or animal could give her. And those intros were thankfully a success, and Sailor got to spend her last several months with Grant and Lockley, and I'm very thankful for that. Then I had another rat named Humdrum, and she was also difficult to do intros with. And there was a point where it was her and her sister Merritt, and I was trying to introduce them to the Weather Girls, who I still have 2 of. And Humdrum was being difficult. She was fighting them a lot. She was consistently pulling like tufts of Foggy's fur out. She was just angry they existed, and she was not having it. And I realized that Merritt was going to pass away soon because they were older at this point. And Merritt just wasn't looking her best anymore. She had a tumor and it was growing very quickly. It was malignant. So I decided to separate them, and I split my critter nation in half, and the Gravies went on top and Merritt and Humdrum went on bottom. And they just kind of lived like that for a little bit. And then when Merritt passed away that night, I was sitting in my room and I saw Humdrum, and consistent anger toward the Weather Girls at this point. But when Merritt passed away that night, she'd been alone for a few hours, and I watched her climb the bars and sniff the bottom of the Weather Girls part of the cage, trying to get up there because she was lonely. And I started intros the next day, and she was flawless because she didn't want to be alone. She was so good to them. They were so good to her. It was super sweet. I got a bunch of cute pictures of them. And she was only alone for about 12 hours, but she was so depressed in that 12 hours that it completely changed how she went through intros for the rest of her life. So it is very important that rats have companionship. Even Ursula, Kelpie and Thistle got spayed recently. And it was so sad. I'd come in here and Ursula would they'd be on my desk, which is over there, and Ursula would be sitting at the top of her cage in the corner watching them. And I couldn't put her with them because she was trying to free them of their vests that kept them from chewing their incisions. But she'd just be sitting up there staring at their cage because she could smell them and she wanted to be with them, but she couldn't be. Rats need companions. It is not okay to keep them alone. Alright, so with that in mind, how many rats is okay? So, if you're just starting out, if you are getting your very first rats, I recommend 3. So you need at least 2. Never get less than 2. You need 2. But I recommend 3 because of a lot of reasons. The main one being it creates better group dynamics, because if you have one rat that's very dominant, they can kind of pick on one rat, the other rat, if there's only 2 of them. Whereas if there's 3 and they can kind of like spread their dominance around a little bit, it really helps. And it also will give each rat a break from each other if they need one. Because again, rats need companions. But some rats do like a little bit of alone time. But alone time is when they're choosing to do it in a cage environment where they can then, when they're tired or cold or whatever, go sleep with their companions. That's fine. But if they only have each other, they can get sick of each other pretty easily. Like, for example, Junimo and Joja here. Joja's a pain in the butt. Intros are going interesting because Joja's a pain in the butt, and poor Junimo is just stuck with her. And they love each other a ton. They get along pretty well, but Joja is a butt, and Junimo does think that as well. There's times when Junimo is so sick of her. No offense, Joja, my love, I love you. I am working on intros right now, but I'm having to do a more unconventional method because Joja is a butt. So if you want to get 2, that is fine. Just keep in mind that a group of 3 will do better. You can also get more than 3 if you want. Just keep in mind that if you get a bunch of rats that are the same age, so like if you get 4 or 5 rats in one go or more, I really don't recommend getting like 6 or 7 rats in one go. I got 7 rats a week apart from each other, 4 in one group and 3 in one group. And they were all about the same age. And yeah, they all passed away this year, and that kind of sucked for me. It's been a hard year for me and my rats because I got a bunch that were the same age, all close together. And then I had a bunch that lived longer than they should have and 2 that died younger than they should have. So, like, keep that in mind. You don't want to get like 6 rats that are the same age because you will reap the consequences of that later down the line. But you can get more than 3 if you get 4, for example. Just keep in mind that if you get multiple around the same age, they're going to have the health issues around the same age. So around the 6-month mark is when they tend to start having hormonal issues, especially for boys. And sometimes that resolves itself, but a lot of times they need to be neutered. And if you have like 4 or 5 rats that are all the same age that all need to be neutered at the same time, that's not going to be the funnest thing for you. And then like around 1.5 years for girls, it's like 1 year and 3 months to 1.5 years, depending on their genetics. That's when things like mammary gland tumors start to pop up. It's not as common in boys, but it can happen. And again, if you have 4 or 5 rats and they all develop tumors really close together, that's not going to be very fun for you. I did a lot of surgeries between 2023 and 2024, and it was not fun for me. And the thing is, I've had rats for a really long time. I knew I could handle it emotionally and financially. I knew I could handle it. Still was not fun. I accepted that burden because I'm dumb. You can learn from my mistakes. Don't be dumb like me. So how many rats should you get to maintain a group? So the question then is, what group size do you want? If you want a small group size, I would recommend trying to maintain a group of 4 to 5. And I know 5 can sound like a lot if you don't have any rats, but it really isn't. The thing with rats is taking care of 1 rat is not any easier than 2 rats. 2 rats really isn't any easier than 3 rats. And that's my opinion for like up to 4 or 5 rats, it's pretty much the same. Like, maintaining a cage really isn't that different for up to 5 rats. Financially it is, because each rat is its own cost, but cage wise it's not that different. And the reason I recommend 4 to 5 rats is because you really don't want to end up in a lone rat situation for the reasons I talked about before. So the reason I recommend 5 is because I do think you should start with a group of 3. And then when those 3 are a year or a little bit over, you can get 2 more, and then that will create a rolling group. And you can kind of just maintain that. And you can get rats once a year, which works really well for small groups. Now, if you want a larger group, you can go every 6 to 9-ish months, and then you can get a group of up to, depending on your cage size, like 9 to 12, and then have a rolling group that way if you get like up to 3 at a time. The group size you want is really dependent upon you. When I first started getting rats in the States, the care standard was to have 2 because that's all they need, and they just love each other. They don't need any more, and that is wildly outdated now. Now it's recommended to start with 3 as it's better, but you can have more if you want. For a while it was going around that 3 to 10 was the perfect group size, which I don't really know where those numbers came from, to be honest, because I've seen people who have groups of up to like 22 rats and it was fine. And I've seen people who have a group of 3 that is fine. I don't recommend pairs, but I've even seen a pair of rats that did fine together. So it just depends on what you feel like you can emotionally, physically, and financially handle. So like currently I have 14 rats that are split between 5 groups. I'm going to be down to 3 groups pretty soon. I have so many intros ahead of me, it's not even funny. But I feel like it'll be a group of 3, which is the Weather Girls and Baker, a group of 6, which will be this cage and another cage, and then a group of 5, which will be my dwarfs. And I feel like all those group sizes are good. I kind of wish that they could have gotten along with the Gravies, but they're too old and unhealthy now. But yeah, I prefer groups of 5 to 6 at a minimum, just for the security of knowing no one's going to end up alone. Because I really hate lone rat situations, and I really, really hate doing intros with extremely old rats, because extremely old rats have health issues and it stresses me out. Now, the last thing, or kind of last thing I want to talk about is, can you get a single baby? So if you have a group of 3 adults, can you go and get 1 baby? And the answer is no. So up to 14 weeks old, roughly. I've seen up to 6 people say up to 16 weeks, but up to 14 weeks old roughly. Rats need same age companionship in order to properly develop socially speaking. So if you get 1 baby and you introduce them to a group of adult rats, that baby rat's not going to have proper social development. And what that means basically is sometimes you can't really tell. Sometimes the rat is more or less normal, but a lot of the time the rat has a lot of anxiety problems. They have a lot of social problems because they don't have another baby rat to play with and learn skills from, like dominance, play fighting, the difference between play fighting and actual aggression, that kind of thing, because adult rats do not play the way baby rats play. It really honestly annoys them to play like babies play. So if you have a single baby rat, they do not have the companionship that they need, and it can lead to stress behaviors. It can lead to social behaviors. Like, I've seen a lot of people who've gotten lone baby rats, and that baby turned into a nightmare for intros later because they didn't understand how to handle other baby rats. They got even more annoyed with them because they couldn't recognize what was going on, what the baby rat's body language was saying. So if you get a single baby rat, the chances are good that they're not going to be the easiest rat to deal with. Which does mean that, yes, if you have a lone rat right now and you are wondering if you can get them companions, yes, you should. Absolutely. And if you do get them babies or even adults, they might be a little difficult to intro, but it will be worth it in the end, because my cat's playing with my pen. Because rats need other rats. They need companionship. And you're definitely missing out on a lot of the aspects of owning rats if you only have one, because you don't get to see the cuddle puddles and the grooming and their accurate social behaviors and all of that. When you're looking into getting baby rats, you should get at least 2. I kind of prefer to get 3 just because I have had baby rats die on me. It's not common, especially if you get them from a reputable place, but it does happen. Accidents happen. They develop illnesses once you bring them home, even from reputable places. It's not common by any means. But I prefer to get 3 just because of that, because I've developed a paranoia about that kind of thing. And it's not necessarily anyone's fault if it does happen. But if you get 3, then at least there's still 2 left, even if one of them becomes ill. Just for your own convenience later, if nothing else, for your own convenience later when you're getting more rats, I do recommend getting at least 2 baby rats so that they can properly socially develop and understand rat body language in a way that helps them throughout their entire life. When possible, I even recommend with adult rats getting 2, just because if you're getting from like a rescue or a rehoming situation, you do kind of want to keep them separate from your rats for quarantine purposes. And it's better for them to quarantine with a buddy so that they don't have all the stress and anxiety of being alone. But obviously there's going to be some situations where only a single rat is available. And if you want to provide them with companionship, then absolutely, that's great. You're doing a good thing to bring them home and allow them to have friends when they don't have friends. So when possible, always with baby rats, but when possible with adult rats, I still recommend try and get at least 2. But if you can't and there's only 1 available and you have rats at home and you want them to have companionship, that is fine. It's better for them to have friends lined up, even if it means they have to be alone for a little bit of a quarantine period. Anyway, that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!